Okay, welcome to our third and final segment of this. Take a seat, Janice. Fell into that seat. Anyway, this is the third and final of this series, and I hope you enjoyed it. But I always like feedback, only of a positive nature, of course. Anyway, let's join together with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok v'divrei Torah. Amen. So, hopefully now you have more of an understanding of how complex the subject, no, it's not a simple subject, but how complex the subject of God in Judaism is. Because we just said, Baruch atah Adonai, Adonai. Well, you began to learn a little bit of Adonai as seen in the biblical times, whatever that exactly meant, in the rabbinical times. And I really didn't go into talking about God in Kabbalah and how to access God and God access us could take us a couple of years of study, as Eric knows, my Zohar class in Lila on Saturday mornings. And so it can be very complex. So today, the third part is it didn't stop. That is, the discussions and the thoughts didn't stop 500 years ago, but continues to this very day. So I chose these modern thinkers. If I am correct, I do believe that all of them are in the next world. There are modern thinkers today, but these are the ones that I'm more familiar with. Well, look at that beautiful thing, whatever that thing was. Make sure you hear this flower just came in or whatever it was, a fake thing on Sunday. Hey, Todd, how you doing? Well, good, God bless you. Keep the price of gold up, it's going down. Okay. So anyway, is that hopefully you have an idea from all of this, actually going back to the first class of the biblical, and that is the way that each of us experiences God is what God is all about to us. Because God has that ability to access each one of us based upon who we are, and each one of us as well. But it is fluid. It changes in our lives. Going back to my grandma Paula, she's rest in peace, that I mentioned in the very first class, she unfortunately was hung up on this idea of God being this overweight, bearded person who sits on a throne, punishing and rewarding people. But that's the way she was born. I think it was in 1894 in Brooklyn, and that's the way she was brought up, okay? A Reform synagogue structure. Union Temple in Brooklyn. Anyone know Union Temple in Brooklyn? Okay, my parents were married there. So anyway, we're going to look at these, and I'm going to take these words that I printed out for you. I'm going to use them as a Torah. In other words, I'm going to basically read them and comment along the way, because otherwise I'm going to get too sidetracked all along the way, and we won't finish this, because I want to make sure that we leave time to ultimately ask ourselves, what does this all mean to all of you, to all of us? Okay. And by the way, I tried to do this to the best of my ability chronologically from earlier to later. So you see the development and how it's changed based upon the times we live in, that's for sure. And one of them, Nushka, thank you, we're going to be having to correct it. It's one of the mistakes in the date. Okay. Modern Jewish theologians and views of God. By the way, a theologian, theo means God, logian means the word of God. Okay, these are people who think about God all the time and try to figure out the systems. Two Jewish thinkers in particular are central to understanding the impact of German philosophy on the emergence of modern Jewish thought. One of them, the first one we're going to look at, is Hermann Cohen, 1842 to 1918. He was a German philosopher, one of the founders of the Marburg School of Neo-Kantianism. And Kant, Immanuel Kant, was a very well-known German philosopher at that time. And he is often held to be, quote, probably the most important Jewish philosopher of, obviously, that century, the 19th century. And the other one, a little bit more modern, so to speak, Franz Rosenzweig, 1886 to 1921, was also a German theologian, philosopher, and translator. Just, see, I'm already getting sidetracking myself. just to come to realize. In America in the 1800s, basically you had Orthodox Jews living here of some sort. You didn't have many others coming from Europe at that time. And obviously, the people came here, I mean, in the 1800s, America was not an easy place to live in or to make a living, that's for sure. And if you came on through Ellis Island onto the Lower East Side, you've seen photographs of the tenements and everything. And if if you've never gone, you should really go. There's some wonderful, wonderful reconstructing of actually tenements, the way they actually looked. And you see the conditions that our ancestors live in coming here. However, during the 1800s in Europe was the development of Reform Judaism. Because going back to the 1700s with the American Revolution, French Revolution, the ghettos were being torn down, and Jews for the first time had the opportunity to study in university settings and begin to open their minds beyond simply Torah, Talmud, Mishnah, etc., the Orthodox traditional Jewish way of life for so long, which meant that some actually left Judaism altogether, but many of them began to open their minds to the world about them because people were what? They were free thinkers. And in the 1800s, actually developed a school in Germany. I have to share this with you because I love sharing my German with you. Okay, here we go. Wissenschaften des Judentums, which means the scientific study of Judaism, which definitely many Reform rabbis and theologians and thinkers were a part of this school of scientific study of Judaism to figure out what is Judaism's past, what does it mean to us today, just like we're asking. So these two gentlemen, these two thinkers, Hermann Cohen and Franz Rosenzweig, are a part of that movement to beginning to do what? To say, you know, something. Number one is, I don't even have to be Jewish anymore. I can become a Christian or anything I want to be. I can become a nothing religiously. And also, of course, what this began to do is open the whole question of what do I believe? And I could question that just like what? In Christianity, the development, obviously, of Protestantism, Reform Church, etc., and many outbreaks from Catholicism, the world certainly was, hi Gail, was definitely changing. Okay, Hermann Cohen. Hermann Cohen's view of God is particular interest as it is quite different from the traditional Jewish conception of God. Okay, so I've given the background now why he could do that. Relying largely on traditional rabbinic sources and commentaries, which you are somewhat, well, more or less familiar with, Cohen emphasizes the ways in which God allows for the realization of what he calls the ethical task. In other words, for him, God is the source of the way to what? Behave. If you're an ethical person, you're a Jewish person. And certainly Reform Judaism took this on to an extreme and was doing away with all of the different rituals as they studied them and said, there's no reason to wear a yarmulke. There's no reason to keep kosher. There's no reason to do this and do that. Do none of them, but if you're a good person, you're a Jew. The attempt to improve existence in accordance with what? Moral rule, and thus to lessen human suffering. Not bad, right? Okay. This notion of God shifts the focus of religion. Its primary purpose is to motivate humans to build an ethical society. Not bad. And by the way, and I think it's in Boca, there still is a movement in Judaism called humanistic Judaism. Okay? I think it's the one in Boca. For any of you remember, I think it was 70th Street off of Central Park West, there was the Society for Ethical Judaism. Okay? There was also, guess what? Just like there's the Church Scientific, what is that? The Church of Science? Science, no, not Scientology. What? No, there's also now there's also a Jewish science. Okay, just like there's Christian, oh, right, Christian Science. Okay, there's also a whole school of Jewish science. And actually, I met the founder of that, Lichtenstein, I think he was at that time. A very interesting people. Ethical culture. Cohen discusses the conception. Notice the word concept in connection to the covenant God established with Noah after the flood. And by the way, if you come to services last night, you're going to flip out with my teaching, my sermon tomorrow night. Really, it'll be a lot of fun. Okay, I'm going to rip Noah apart. Yes, I took care of God, Abraham and Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and God in Rosh Hashanah, and now I'm taking care of Noah. Okay, so come next tomorrow's going to be really fun. Okay, this covenant is distinct from the covenant made with the Israelites at Sinai. Notice, what is he saying here? And these are obviously taking his words and summarizing them as teachings. What does that mean? It's extraordinary for a Jew to be able to stand outside Judaism and to say what? The covenant that we make is not just with whom? With Jews, in that it is universal and stresses that all of human was created in the image of God. Okay, now you might say, well, that doesn't that Stan was asking, B'Tselem Elohim, what does it mean? I think it was last class, the one before that. What does it mean for human beings were created in the image of God? Well, truthfully, Stan, in the Bible, it's only talking about Jews. They didn't care about anybody else. But Herman Cohen, coming out of that ghetto shell, all of us says, guess what? It's about all people. Okay. Cohen is more interested in the symbolic role of a God vis-a-vis humankind. Notice the word there, rather than the role God plays in the lives of individuals. It's all of humankind's idea of God is in principle humanistic. Notice also, and I bolded it, that's my bolding, and that is what? Idea. God is an idea for Herman Cohen. Alternatively, one might understand that for Cohen, to be a humanist is to be religious. The human desire for universal ethics is the foundation for the belief in God, for it is God that motivates the realization of morality. So if you believe in God, you will have to be what, Eric? A moral person. And if you don't believe in God, you can't be moral, because the idea of God is one that is based upon morality. For Cohen, God is an idea or a concept. Notice, and you'll see this later on in Mordechai Kaplan. Rather than describing God as an existent being or as a force behind creation, as that's what's in the Bible, right? God is a spiritual being, whatever that means. And God created and is the force behind creation. And Jewish tradition, as expressed by the rabbis, is every single, if God was not creating at this second, I'd be gone. You'd be gone, Janice, sorry, but we all be poof, like that. God, it's sort of like, for instance, if I pull the plug on that Eric's laptop, aside from the fact that he would be very upset with me, to say the least, is everyone's watching, hi everybody, but the fact is, it would be off. And that whole idea, which by the way was a Descartes, Rousseau kind of idea from the Middle Ages also, the watchmaker idea, within, not so much in Judaism, but it was expressed by some Jewish thinkers, but certainly in Christianity, the watchmaker. God created, and just like my watch here, okay, this watch actually doesn't work that way, you have to plug the thing in. But the fact is, the old kind of watches, guess what? God sets the watch, winds it, and just lets it go. Whatever happens, happens to the watch. That's the watchmaker concept. But in traditional Judaism, no. This moment in time would not, God is constantly coughing. Okay. Well, why did God make coffee? Coffee, not coffee. Yes, God is coffee. Yes, coffee, God is coffee. Okay, but anyway, is the fact that in traditional Judaism, which is non-existent for Cohen, because he doesn't care about that. God is an ethical, moral inspiration to us, the idea of God. But in traditional Judaism, and by the way, see how I'm relating everything to all the classes, right? Moving back and forth. In Kabbalah, there is a divine flow of energy from the infinite one called Ein Sof all the time. It's always here, but as it comes down lower and lower and lower into our world, which is so physically and so filled with bad things and bad people and evil and bad stuff, is that the flow gets kind of cramped up and verkrimped and lost. And therefore we have to uncover it to push it back up. But without that source of God energy, Kaputsky. Okay, I just made that word up. This demands the kind of universal ethical concern which in turn allows for the possibility of what? What were they looking for? A moral world. Okay. Moral world. Cohen's philosophy is thus less concerned with the Jewish people in particular and more interested in the role of Judaism in the world and the Jewish duty to teach universal ethics. By the way, this very much influenced Reform Judaism as it developed in the 1800s and then coming to America in the 20th century. The religion of reason out of the sources of Judaism, Cohen writes, the general love for mankind is the messianic consequence of monotheism, for which the love of the stranger paved that way. The Torah granted equal rights to a non-Jew under the Jewish law and state. Everyone is equal, Stan. But, and again, I talked about this before. that beautiful phrase, "Yahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your neighbor as you love yourself. The word re'acha, many traditional rabbis in the Talmud said, yeah, it's your Jewish neighbor you should love more than yourself. I think this word, I don't like this word. Okay, but forget them. I will never use that word, but I just used it. Okay, because I hate that word. But the fact is, guess what? The Gentiles you don't have to love your Gentile as you love yourself. Only your Jew. Well, Herman Cohen would say, sorry. That word, you love your neighbor as you love yourself, you love everybody as you love yourself. Notice how the ideas are changing in a dramatic, incredible way. Wow, what we're doing here. Okay, number two person, Franz Rosenzweig. Believe, by the way, I took 3 years of German in college. Okay, so now you know where I listen to that whole thing, right? Okay, believed that any argument in defense of Judaism necessitates a departure from purely rational thought. Franz Rosenzweig is a very interesting person because notice he says, guess what? If you are going to speak about Judaism, forget the rational. Now, this is exactly different than Harman Cohen, right? Everything is rational, thinking, behavior. Let's see what happens. Fueled by both optimism and existentialism, Rosenzweig moved beyond rationalism and universalism, and notice, and returned to particular and personal notions of the experienced God in the world. So in his most famous work, The Star of Redemption, if you want to read a book, it is readable. It's not, except they read it in German, obviously, unless some of you know German. But it is a very exciting book called The Star of Redemption. And he's speaking, Herman Cohen didn't care about individual Jews. He wanted the people of Israel to be the role model for moral, ethical behavior. That's nice, right? I think that's good. Okay, there's nothing wrong with it. But where do you go with it? When you go to synagogue, what do? We have all these prayers, all these rituals, all these things we do. What do? Just, okay, forget them. Well, early Reform Judaism said exactly that. And I remember reading a letter in some book about Reform Judaism occurring in Frankfurt, Germany. I think it was in 1750, which is Reform Judaism began in the 1700s in Frankfurt, Germany. This Reform Jew said, I feel so good because I can walk into my Reform synagogue and walk into the local Lutheran church that was next door, and you can't tell the difference between the two. And he was thrilled. That meant something to him because why? He could now finally be accepted by whom? His neighbor, the Christian neighbor, who before this couldn't stand him and probably beat him up or God knows what. Okay. Now, continuing here, he describes his intellectual approach as new thinking, in which the basis for one's ideas is one's actual life, as opposed to abstract thinking about life. Interesting. This approach emphasizes the individual self, particularly the speech of the individual person, which allows for a dialogue and a living relationship with others. Rosenzweig believed that this encounter with the other teaches us about the nature of God because it encourages our commitment to, he still emphasizes ethical living. He's still a German philosopher of this same period of time, basically, as Hermann Cohen. But notice, he's an existentialist. Existentialism is a very complicated subject, to say the least. I should ask Colleen to talk about it, actually, probably. Some of the more famous philosophers, have you ever read Jean-Paul Sartre? Okay, I took 3 years of French. Okay. In high school, unfortunately. I should have taken Spanish because I can't speak to any Spanish people, except I know, by the way, you should all know about your rabbi. I am multilingual in foods, okay? I know many, many foods and many, numerous languages, at least 10 languages and foods, okay? And well, booze is, yes, okay. Thank you, James. Okay. Now, turn the page. Rosenzweig's most important work, The Star of Redemption, denies traditional philosophy's argument for an abstract universal concept of God. See, the problem is, notice what he's doing. He's basically criticizing the biblical view of God. Because the problem is, remember, there's God, the transcendent one, the creator God. There's a God who's inside of me. Well, the abstract, that God out there, what is abstract? That's the traditional view quite often. That's what my grandma, Paula, had problems with. How can I access that God? And especially notice what Franz Rosenzweig said. And by the way, you'll see the next person, Martin Buber, he then took this to the next stage. Where do I find God between my relationship with other people? Okay. And embraces traditional Jewish language for a God who wills, acts, and is dynamic. In contrast to Cohen, Okay, this is the really important thing aside from the last sentence, which I highlighted. In contrast to Cohn, the God Rosenzweig describes is not an abstract idea, but rather is an active, willful agent in history which continues to illuminate human existence. So the question to ask ourselves as we, of course, eventually confront this, I hope personally, is who is God to you? I mean, what is you come to? Most of you come to temple on some form of a regular basis, or your home you pray in your own personal lives. What does that mean? How do you access that God? Does God actually hear you? And what does that mean? I mean, God doesn't have ears. So therefore, how does God hear you? Right, Betty? Thank you, Betty. Rosenzweig realized that the Jew does not need to seek God. Well, guess what? He is already with God. Okay, now, that is a very powerful statement, but basically it goes back way, God bless you, Laura. Basically, the idea what? That we are what? Created, stands question, we are created in the image of God. Therefore, guess what? God is with me, and also what is another, I think, preposition? In me. One with me. Okay, that's powerful stuff, right? Okay. Rosenzweig realized that that the Jew does not need to seek God, for he is already with God. And by the way, notice he said the Jew, whereas Hermann Cohn was more universal, all people. Rosenzweig brought it back to the Jew individually. He spoke of the birth of a new learning one, which and he established what was called Lehr houses, which mean schools to study these things. No longer starts from the Torah. Now, notice this, and this is really powerful, but this is so biblical, as you now know. No longer starts from the Torah and leads to life, but the other way around. How do I know about God in my life? Now, granted, if I was Orthodox, was brought up as an Orthodox Jewish boy, where would I find out about God first? Where? Torah, right? By the age of 7, you're already studying Torah, you're going to yeshiva, all of that. But remember, these people are no longer Torah Jews, Torah learning Jews. They're out there within the non-Jewish environment and community, and he's saying, guess what? And it's similar to what? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, remember in the Bible? How do I find God? I find God in my life. And certainly for me, that has definitely been a part of it. From life, from a world that knows nothing of the law back to the Torah, and from the periphery back to the center from the outside in. That is a very powerful statement. I don't know if it resonates with you, but it certainly resonates with me. That's where I find God every single moment of life, in my experiences of life. And I'm able to say, and it's definitely biblical, that beautiful scene of the Jacob and the ladder. Remember the scene, and Jacob fell asleep, and the ladder appeared, and there were angels going up and down the ladder. And eventually God appeared to him and spoke to him and said, don't worry, wherever you go, I will be with you and watch over you. And then Abraham wakes up and he says, Zeh Shar Hashemayim, this place where I slept is no other than Shar Hashemayim, the gate of heaven. And I did not even know it. But that's the sad part, because guess what? We should know it. Okay. So that is Rosenzweig. And see the differences? I hope you appreciate that. Am I explaining it okay? You see the differences. Okay. And by the way, the Star of Redemption, what Rosenzweig does, which makes it so interesting, he takes the Jewish star, which obviously is based upon figure, a triangle. Okay, what do they call that? A triangle, squares, rectangles, geometric, right? I think geo something, geometric figure, a triangle. Our Jewish life is the following: God, Torah, Israel. God, Torah, and not necessarily the state of Israel, but rather the community of Israel. And where are you on this? Because guess what? Based upon what we just read, if it's based upon my life, then it is organic. It is moving. It is a living triangle. Because guess what? It changes all the time, right? One thing is emphasized more than another. So for instance, we're sitting here right now, and basically all three are moving together, right? But the fact is, it is organic triangle of God, Israel, and Torah. And by the way, there are certain, you can almost, many Jews, you can kind of put them on the triangle somewhere, okay? Orthodox Jews, for the most part, are God, Torah part, okay? And then you can switch it around. Someone who's a great supporter of Israel is going to be at the Israel Bonds event in November. Make sure you're there, everybody. even if you're not buying a bond, just to be there, $25 is not so bad, and you're supporting the Sulkovs, but also you're supporting Israel by a show it last year when they had almost 4,000 people there. It's just great to be around a lot of Jews, okay? That's that part of the triangle, okay? You're not doing it for God necessarily, although you could say you are, right? Okay, so let's turn the page. Oh, no, you look down the page rather than Martin Buber. Now, by the way, and I think Shoshana, it's not 1978, obviously, because otherwise he's the Dorian Gray is 1918 to 1965. 1918. Maybe it could even be 08. I have to look that up again. You want to Google it. Maybe 08, because 1918 would only be 55 years old. I'm not sure. Okay. Now, okay, but notice now we're talking about someone in the 20th century. Was an Austrian-Israeli philosopher. For Buber, God is not a concept. Again, Hermann Cohen, he's not a concept or an object that can be understood or grasped through reason or empirical observation. Okay. You can't prove to me God exists. And by the way, the Bible is based on that. I mean, Buber, even though some people take him, I mean, by the way, Buber has been used in many other religions. You could translate him into Buddhism, you can translate him into Catholicism, as you'll see in a few moments, because he's talking about relationships between people. That's where you find God. Okay? Instead, God is an eternal thou that can only be encountered in a personal, relational way. In this sense, Buber's notion of God is similar to his conception of the I-thou relationship. If you have never read the book I and Thou, you should definitely read it. It's kind of an interesting book. Fortunately or unfortunately, many people turn to the pages in which he has an I-thou, thou, Thou, a relationship with a tree, okay? But that's very Buddhist, okay? But that means he's able to look at a tree and become one with the tree. He really absorbs the tree, the essence of the tree within him. You become one. You see, the fact is that if I'm going to chop down that tree, it's an I-it relationship. I'm viewing that tree as an object for me to use. It's all about me side versus the tree. In the I-thou relationship, the individual is able to encounter the other as a unique and valuable individual. Whose phone keeps going up there? And to engage with them in a way that is characterized by empathy and understanding. Yeah. 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 Beautiful. Yesterday, Judy and I and another couple went to see The Wiz at Kravis. And I don't know how many of you have seen The Wiz, but they portrayed Dorothy with the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Lion is an empathic person. She beautifully relates to them because they're in all turmoil. I don't have a brain, and she holds. First of all, she takes their hand and she speaks to them and says, "You know, I really am so. I feel sorry. I'm sorry you're going through this turmoil. I really hope." She speaks to them she empathizes with their pain. She simply doesn't say, "Well, that's too bad. I really feel badly for you," and goes about. It's beautiful. And recently in the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, we saw a video because they're trying to train chaplains how to relate to police officers. And it was a wonderful, I'd love to show that here. It's a short animation showing the difference between empathy and sympathy. When you're sympathy, you're standing over a person. I'm really sorry for what you're going through. It's too bad, really. You know, I feel you. Well, you don't feel anything. Okay, it's all from here. But if you get down and sit with that person and hold their hand, okay. So that's what basically an I-thou relationship is, where you're not using someone but relating to them. And as it says in the last sentence there, similarly in encountering God as an eternal thou, the individual is able to enter into a personal relationship with divinity characterized by mutual recognition. And the other word, which is very important, is respect. Turning the page. Buber's conception of God is not based on a set of religious doctrines or dogmas, which is why he can actually become a part of any religion whatsoever, but rather on a personal experience of encounter and relationship. This experience of encounter is not limited to any particular religious tradition or belief system, but open to all individuals who are willing to engage in a personal encounter with the divine. But Buber's notion of God is therefore deeply rooted in his existentialist philosophy, which what? Emphasizes the importance of personal freedom and responsibility in human experience. One of the key implications of Buber's notion of God is that divinity is not something that can be understood or grasped. You can't think about God. You can think about God all you want to, but will be encountered in a personal, relational way, and this encounter is respected by mutual recognition, respect, and dialogue. This understanding of divinity is radically different from traditional concepts of God. Okay, very different. Well, they certainly was Jewish. And I don't know what his personal life was. I never read about that. I don't know. Conceptions of God as a distant, transcendent being who was removed from human experience, which we talked about. For Buber, God is not something that can be grasped or understood through reason or empirical observation, but is instead something that must be encountered in a personal, relational way. And I know I've told you this, most of you heard this story already, but I'll relate it again. Is that one of the flaws that I specialized in and visited during my 30 years at Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York was pediatrics. And I was walking on the floor one day, this woman, a grandmother, came up to me and said, can I go visit her grandson and say Psalms for him, the book of Psalms, which is considered to be a very holy form of praying for somebody. And he was in a coma at this point with 40 tumors in his lungs and basically dying, or they weren't sure what was happening, but he was in a coma. So I said, as I would always do, I said, of course. So I walked into this boy's room, sat down next to him, took his hand immediately, and introduced myself to him. Because you have to show respect. You just can't start off by saying Psalms because he doesn't know who I am. And by the way, as most of you are aware, the last of the five senses to go is our sense of hearing. So no matter what condition anyone is in, to the last breath, you can certainly continue to talk to them, express love, etc. So I began to say the Psalms. I forget which Psalms, doesn't matter which one I started to pray. And all of a sudden, the sad part of it is my I-it part took over, speaking in Buberian language. My I-it took over. In other words, I simply began to analyze what was all up here, not here. So I began to analyze what in the world was I doing here? What am I praying for? What is this whole thing all about? And I said, do I pray as part of my praying here with the Psalms that he awakened from the coma? And I said, no, I don't want that because the coma is the body's way of shutting down from pain. Do I pray that he simply come out? All of a sudden, there is a thing called a spontaneous remission, where literally a person who had cancer has no cancer at all. A friend of ours on Long Island, she definitely, from the scan that was done the day before her gynecological surgery, had a huge ovarian tumor. The next day, they went in for the surgery and they couldn't find it. It was gone. How did the doctors say, we have no idea how it happens? I have no idea whatsoever. Things happen. Can you pray for that? No. I mean, it happens, it happens. Okay. The third thing is, do I pray that he just simply pass away? In a sense, that would be the right prayer for me anyway. If you're going to have to if you want to come up with a prayer, he should pass away, let him die, and therefore end his whatever suffering and difficulty he's going through, and certainly for his entire family. However, what began to happen is that up until this point in time, I didn't feel his hand in mine. Because guess what? I was all inside myself. I was in an I-it relationship with him. I didn't even see him anymore. It was all where in here in me. But all of a sudden, when my mind quieted down, because I went through all the questions, and there's nothing left, that's it. All of a sudden, at that moment in time, I felt his hand in mine, and my hand in his, and all of a sudden, I felt God there. And then it was an I-thou relationship with him. And what Martin Buber says is when we have that I-thou relationship, then guess what? It's not only the capital Thou, the thou, the great You, God, but also God comes about in that moment. When you are with people and treating them not as objects to be used or abused by you, but rather to relate to them as understanding that both of us are in the image of God, then God is there. So for instance, hopefully, as I'm speaking to you now, I feel God here. We're talking about God. How can that, if you're not, if anything, you should be able to feel God's presence if you're thinking about God and expressing about God. And we're all treating each other. I'm not treating you as objects to teach something to you because we're all very much in what? We have relationships. Rabbi, congregant, friends, whatever you want to call us. As it says in the Talmud, called Yisrael Charevim Zelazeh. All Israel is Chaverim. The word Chaverim means friend, but actually the word means connected, right? Interconnected with each other. Okay, so that's, yes, Eric.
Is it the relationship with God or relationship with others that he's talking about?
The relationship with God comes about by a relationship with others. Okay. Or not, but not only others. okay, when last night we were driving home from this restaurant, and Judy said, "Look at that beautiful sunset." But granted, we were driving, but if we pulled over to the side of the road and just, you know, okay, you're then also finding you're now treating that sunset rather, not as simply, oh, that's nice, and keep on going, but rather you become one with it. Then that's where you find God in that sunset.
Oh, so you do have experience with God, with those types of situations.
Exactly. Anything we have a relationship in which we're not teaching something, take out your camera, Judy, take the pictures before we go. Then there's an it, okay? It's amazing. For those of you who have taken pictures when you go on vacation, okay? What's between, there's one of our, we did 13 trips to Israel with the synagogue up north. And in one of them, I decided to buy a camcorder, okay, to record the trip so we'd have it for other groups to see. So the whole stupid 2 weeks, I walked around this idiotic camcorder with me interviewing people. Guess what? I didn't relate to anybody or anything because I was so busy with the of taking this camera, taking the video, I didn't appreciate anything. It was because guess what? I had this camera between me and people. Okay. And so I was thrilled. The next trip, I said, forget this. I don't need this. Okay. Next one, Abraham Heschel. 1907, that's true, 1972. Was a Polish-American rabbi and one of the leading Jewish theologians and Jewish philosophers of the 20th century. Heschel, a professor of Jewish mysticism, by the way, and he was, by the way, in the lineage of many great Hasidic Rebbes, at the Jewish Theological Seminary, of course, which is known as Conservative Judaism, authored a number of widely read books on Jewish philosophy, and was a leader in the U.S. civil rights movement. And he did definitely go on marches with MLK. Much of Heschel's work seeks to free Jewish theology from the constraints of Maimonides' philosophical concept of an absolutely transcendent God who is independent of humanity. In other words, in Maimonides, in this extreme sense, which we looked into a little bit last year, God is transcendent. God is the great creator of all, and doing this and doing that, but really individuals, it gets to be more complicated. To this, Heschel counterposes the concept of divine pathos, that is, of a God who searches for man. God wants to find us. God wants to find you. God's looking for you. Are you willing to look for God? Because God is in need of man. It emphasizes the interdependence of the divine and the human. There was a Rabbi, Henry Slonimsky, a Reformed rabbi, who said, he actually was quoting probably the Talmud, and that is, as much as we need God, God needs us. Because this whole system doesn't work out right if we deny the existence of God and don't try to be a better person. What's the point of this whole thing of creation? Why did God make us if we're going to destroy everything? Judaism is so commandment-oriented precisely because God's kingship is realized on earth through, guess what? How do we then answer God's call to us? Through mitzvahs. That's what God is sending. That's the message that God is sending us. Oh, yeah. Oh, do mitzvahs, Rabbi. I said that right there. No. Okay. God is sending us messages, text messages, every single moment, letting us know about the mitzvahs, the commandments that are coming our way. That's the way God searches for us. Okay, that's the way God searches for us. In fact, according to the Midrash, God gave Israel so many commandments because Israel had made God king first, unlike the other nations. Even more striking is the rabbinical concept that it is human witness that makes God real. The Kotzker Rebbe was asked by his students, where is God? And the Kotzker Rebbe said to his students, God is where you let God in. Simple. Okay, God is here. But if you don't turn the switch on, the light bulbs don't go on. And if you don't say, God is here, Baruch Hashem, thank God, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, then guess what? God is here, but we don't know it. Heschel often cites the Midrashic gloss to Isaiah 43:12, quote, so you are my witnesses, declares the Lord, and I am God, to wit. When you are my witnesses, then I am God, but when you are not my witnesses, then I am, as it were, God, not God. Unlike Martin Buber saw in Kabbalah a Gnostic phenomenon that deviated from the biblical and rabbinic traditions. In other words, Martin Buber definitely was not in any tradition of Judaism. He was an existentialist who took his ideas from outside of Judaism, and people could apply it to Judaism. But guess what? So can Buddhists and Hindus and Catholics. Everyone could be a Buberian because everyone has their way of relating to God and people as in a relational way and not in a using way. In the transcript of a talk entitled Jewish Theology, Heschel summarized his reading of the Jewish sources. God is in need of man. The idea of God being in need of man is central to Judaism and pervades all the pages of the Bible and of the Chazal, the Talmud, and is understandable in our own time. Without the principle of God in search of man, the whole idea of Shekhinah is not intelligible. It permeates rabbinic literature and post-rabbinic thought in Judaism. Okay, and we turn the page. Without an understanding of the idea of the Shekhinah, now the Shekhinah is God's feminine presence in the world. When you feel, God has various ways, as we've already learned. God has different ways of communicating with us. Various ways. We've discussed this in the Bible and other literature. Well, in Kabbalah, particularly, it speaks very heavily and emphasizes the Shekhinah, God's presence with us. So, for instance, when I would visit people in the hospital, when you visit people in the hospital, why shouldn't you, person's lying here, why shouldn't I not stand over the person, but rather sit next to the person? You might say, well, that's a good relation, right? You should look the person in the eyes. You're standing, doctors stand over people. Why don't doctors sit down? Because they have to show what? Who's in charge? I'm still standing. You're in the bed, kiddo. You can't walk, kiddo. I can. I can leave here. You can't. You're stuck. There's a whole lot of body language stuff, right? Okay. There's a whole power thing about doctors, etc. Now, when a doctor does sit down with you, either you can say, "Oh my God, I'm dying." Yeah. Why is this next to me? Okay, my God, what is up? I thought I was here for a toenail. Okay, but the fact is that you should be sitting next to you, because as the Kabbalah says, is that above the person in the bed, above that person's head is the Shekhinah, is God's presence. You don't want to invade that holy space. Okay. So the Shekhinah is everywhere. And therefore, Heschel says that when we fulfill the mitzvot, we awaken the Shekhinah's presence that is here all the time. Okay, that's his language. God in Search of Man, by the way, his very famous book is God in Search of Man. He has other books as well, but if you want to read that book, it's very readable. And he basically sees God in everything, not only in mitzvot, but he talks about the overwhelming sense of God in a sunrise, a sunset, the birth of a child, being overwhelmed by the power of the transcendent becoming part of our experiential world. Finally, God's indwelling on earth is the fulcrum of Heschel's theology. Man's capacity to approach God arises from God's indwelling in his people of Israel in a form of divine presence that Israel recreates through the performance of the mitzvot. Only to say as number one is, I'm not sure Herman Cohen's Jewish life, but I would bet he never went to synagogue once he became an adult and had these thoughts. There's no need to. Just be, how many people have said to me, well, oh, Rabbi, I don't go to synagogue, I don't even go to high holidays, but I'm a good person, so I'm a good Jew, right? That's Herman Cohen speaking. That's all you have to do. If you're a good person, you love everybody, even you love your neighbor who is not Jewish, you love everybody, you're a good Jew. Okay, all right, but that's Herman Cohen. The same thing, of course, with Franz Rosenzweig. He might have gone to a Reform synagogue because he's more of a universalist, but still, and more of a, who's right, in terms of experiences of life, remembers from life to Torah. But how much of a Jewish observance he would follow, I would bet it's pretty minimalist. I would bet you Martin Buber certainly ain't going to synagogue. Probably went out to nature. He's probably a nice guy to meet. Okay. And if I was in a hospital, I'd want him to visit me. That's a question. That'd be an interesting question. Out of all these people at the end, which one of them would you like to visit if God forbid you're in a hospital? Okay. Now, next person, Eugene Borowitz. Eugene Borowitz, 1924 to 2016. He was one of my teachers in rabbinical school and actually my advisor for my rabbinic thesis as well as for my doctoral thesis. Was an American leader and a philosopher in Reform Judaism, known largely for his work on Jewish theology and Jewish ethics. He also edited a journal called Shema and taught at my school, Hebrew Union College in New York. Now, Eugene Borowitz was definitely an existentialist. In other words, we find God and similar to Franz Rosenzweig, okay, very much in what? Very much a relationship way. That's where we find God in our relationship. He believed that God becomes significant in a personal relationship, emphasizing the importance of individual experiences and realities. Borowitz's work is very well known, called Covenant Theology, and normative ethics reflects his commitment to the idea that Judaism, especially liberal Judaism, which is ours, Reform, must be rethought in light of modernity and individual autonomy. In other words, keep it in mind, there are basically three ways to view Jewish life. If I had some kind of a board here, I'd show you, but I don't have one, so you'll have to. Wouldn't it be great if we had one of those things I can actually draw? I see this on television all the time now, right? These TV shows now, like The Resident and Doc and all these great shows, they write in the air and everyone can see what you write. Okay, so imagine see something. So the first word up here is, okay, you got it? Oh, I just scribbled it, sorry. Okay, theonomy, Theonomy. The second one in the middle is heteronomy, Heteronomy. And the third one at the bottom is autonomy, Autonomy. Okay. The prefix nomi means law. Basically, you can define Jewish life in all as on the scale. Theonomy, God-centered. Heteronomy, like heterosexual, a little bit of both in the middle somewhere. Or autonomy, total self. So take Herman Cohen. There's no question he's in the third one at the bottom. Autonomy. I'm a free human being. I'm a free person. I could be Jewish. I can be anything I want to be. But guess what? I'm a free autonomous thinker. I can think what I want. Okay. But on the other hand, someone like Gene Borowitz, Alav Shalom, he was definitely heteronomy. In other words, I'm a free person. He said it here. He was a Reform Jew. He was brought up Reform, I believe. He taught Reform rabbis like myself. But the fact is that he also understood that, guess what? I'm attached to theonomy. I'm attached to the God of our people, whatever that means. I'm a part of Torah and Mishnah and Talmud and Shulchan Aruch, and I've got to find myself in all of them, but I can't reject them either, as early Reform Judaism did. A cute story, in a sense, about this. I think I'm not told this. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I did. Take, for instance, the laws of kosher. I'm not going to get into a whole discussion about kashrut, but just to say there's biblical kosher and there's rabbinical kosher. So, for instance, there is nowhere in the Bible, thou shalt not eat a cheeseburger. It does not say that anywhere. Okay. It does not say, it doesn't even speak about kosher slaughter of animals in the Bible, in the Torah, anywhere. The Torah simply states those animals you can eat, those animals you can't eat, and describes the characteristics in terms of that. So, for instance, let's take animals. If an animal chews cud and has claws and hoofs, it's kosher. If it lacks one of those aspects, then it's not kosher. So, Rabbi Bor was told this in one of the classes. I remember it's one of the sessions. He found himself. He did lecture tours. So he was out somewhere in Idaho or some. God forsake, no, in Idaho somewhere or Iowa, whatever. And he was at a restaurant by himself, and he looked on the menu, and he will eat in non-kosher restaurants, but be concerned about what he's eating. So he will not eat pig, he won't eat lobster or shellfish, those things. And so he's looking on the menu, and lo and behold, on the menu was a bison burger. But everyone, I'm sure you all know, there's no such thing as a buffalo. It does not exist, a bison's, all of them. We learned this when Jude and I went to Yellowstone National Park. So anyway, the bison burger. So he said, wow, I've never had one. That sounds interesting. Maybe it's really good. And it did say less fat than a regular burger. So the waiter comes over, and the way he orders it, the waiter disappears. He said, but hold it. Is a bison kosher or not? So he's trying to picture, this is before cell phones, so now you can Google it, okay, to say anything. Is it kosher or not? Does it chew its cud? Does it have cloven hooves? And blah, blah, blah. He's just not sure. He's in a lot of turmoil. So he calls over the waiter, and now notice where is he in the scale. He's autonomous, and that he can even ask this question. First of all, an Orthodox Jew who's totally theonomy ain't even going to be in that restaurant, right? Okay, he ain't even going to walk through the restaurant. Forget about it. You'll bring your own sandwich from Brooklyn to eat in Idaho. Okay, but the fact is he's in turmoil because he's stuck in the theonomy part, because he does believe that God commanded us in the Torah to follow these laws and this way of life of eating. So he calls over the waiter and says, I'm not really sure. Can I cancel that? And I'll just have such and such, whatever it was, fish, let's say. And the waiter says, well, that's okay. You can. However, the way this place works is it's already ordered. It's already on the grill. I'm going to have to pay for that burger out of my own pocket. So Rabbi Borowitz then immediately jumped down from theonomy to the next heteronomy. Well, you know something? I'm torn by tradition, but also free will, and also, guess what? Like Hermann Cohen ethics. I can't do that to that man. Now, Rabbi Borowitz had a choice. He could have simply said, well, don't worry about it. I'll pay for it, but I'm not going to eat it. But on the other hand, he simply said, okay, bring it, whatever. Because then he gave up the theonomy part at all. He said, if it's not kosher, I ordered it, and he's going to be held accountable, so I'm going to eat it anyway. It's going to be, yes, a bison is kosher. Okay, so the fact is notice how his decisions fluctuate between these three. And what is this all about for my teacher, Gene Borowitz? It was called covenantal theology. In other words, what does a covenant mean? So let's say, Michael, I make a covenant with you. It means you and I make a contract with each other. And I agree to certain things. You agree to certain things. We shake hands or hug or sign a document. If it's really official, we get a lawyer involved. We want to get in deep trouble. Sorry, Hilly. Okay. But the fact is, that's a covenant. And so therefore, we as Jews, and the thing is, a Jew is very challenging because we were born Jewish. Or you can become Jewish by conversion, but we're born Jewish. And so just by birth itself, I immediately enter into that covenantal relationship with God. And I have my part to fulfill, whatever that is exactly. And God has God's part to fulfill with me, whatever that exactly is. And we're in a relationship with each other. So notice what Borowitz does. He kind of moves around through all of these things I described, right? Ideas, existential relationships, and feelings, and where I'm at now. Beautifully. So in a sense, at that moment when I was with that boy, okay, and by the way, he did die, the young man. He never came out of the coma. With that boy, the fact is that I was moving back, and when I was asking all those questions, where was I? Basically, I was into myself, auto. I was into here down below. And then all of a sudden, I began to heteronomize. I began to feel the other and relate to the other. And then immediately, I jumped up to the top part, and I felt God's presence. Okay, the last one. Mordecai Kaplan is interesting. But notice 1881 to 1983. How old was he when he died? No, 2002. 102, 2002. 102 years old. Mordecai Kaplan. He was brought up as a fully Orthodox Jew, and you'll see how he changed his thinking. It goes back to Hermann Cohen in a way, but he's more modern than Hermann Cohen. And yet, in his lifestyle, he was fully Orthodox in his observance of the laws of the mitzvot, completely Orthodox. Okay, was an American conservative rabbi, writer, Jewish educator, professor, theologian, philosopher, activist, religious leader who founded the Reconstructionist movement of Judaism. He has been described as a towering figure in the recent history of Judaism for his influential work in adapting it to modern society, contending that Judaism should be a unifying creative force by stressing the cultural and historical character of the religion as well as the theological doctrine. Now, if you look at the dates here, Mordecai Kaplan was in 1920s, he was already almost 40 years old. He was an Orthodox Jew. He was becoming more involved in conservative Judaism as it was developing in the 1920s. Here in America, JTS, Jewish Theological Seminary, began to come into being. And he began to ask the following question. If you think back to the 1920s, for those of you who were born then, or in that era, or certainly for those who know about it, in terms of America, we were highly influenced by two main streams of thought. One was psychology, in other words, Freudianism, and the other was sociology, sociological concepts. And so Mordecai Kaplan said, you know something, is that we need to reconstruct Judaism to become in line with modern thinking. So we are going to apply the concepts, psychological concepts, such as Freud and Jung, okay, and others, Carl Jung, as well as, of course, others, such as sociologically, Compton, all those guys, I forget their name now. Okay, my mother got her master's in sociology from college. Anyway, doctorate from NYU in education. So anyway, is that he said, you know something, we can reconstruct Judaism on these things. And guess why? Because guess what? In the 1920s, yeah, there were Orthodox Jews here in America, and there were Reformed Jews in America. And guess what? There were a lot of Jews who were saying, I don't need this Judaism stuff. I'm autonomous. I am free. I'm in America. I don't need to go to synagogue. Who needs it anymore? There's no God who can, after all, Herman Cohen would say, there's no God who can tell you to go to shul. There are no commandments. Martin Buber says, you know something, you can feel your way through life. I can relate to a tree. I can relate to a person. I can relate to a sunrise. I can relate to a sunrise. I don't have to pray. It's relational. You can take any one of these to their extreme, right? And some people did. And so Mordecai Kaplan said, but there's a lot of Jews out there who are what? They're thinkers. And they know about psychology now and sociology and the way people are living their lives. So let's apply it to Judaism. So this is, what he did was, his most famous book is Judaism Without Supernaturalism. That's his main book. And he basically ripped apart supernaturalism and Judaism. When we come to synagogue on Friday, on Shabbat tomorrow night, you're not praying to any God whatsoever. You're praying to yourself. But you're not just praying to yourself, you're praying to yourself with a capital S, your higher self. And this is very much in time, if you think about it, you're actually going back to Herman Cohen again, 100 years before. And that is, guess what? This is good psychology. When we say the prayer, oh God, bring peace on, may there be peace on earth, guess what? I'm actually praying to the God concept within me to inspire me to make a life of peace between me and others. Because after all, how does that sound? What's that wonderful song? Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. Okay. See, if you simply say, well, it begins with God, well, garnished helping. Okay. You got to be a part of the peace process. So he said, well, let's put God out of this whole thing. Because I don't know about God at all. We don't know. So let's get rid of the supernatural stuff. And that's just when we come to synagogue and we pray, as is defined in Judaism without supernaturalism, God is the power that makes for my salvation. That's the in reconstruction, in pure reconstruction. I'm talking about pure form, okay? I'm not talking about the way it's practiced by a lot of people today. They have no idea what in the world they're talking about, most of them anyway. But the fact is, because they don't really understand Reconstructionism, it's a highly intellectual branch of Judaism, which is why most Reconstructionist synagogues are around college campuses for the most part, because they really attracted people who are more intellectual and less existentialist dealing at one point in time. And anyway, he said, God is the power that makes for my own salvation. So when I pray to God, I'm praying to my higher self to bring about salvation, to bring about a betterment in my life and world. Let's think about other things. Why did Mordecai Kaplan keep completely? He didn't have Borowitz's problem. He would never walk into that restaurant to begin with the bison thing. But guess what? Why not? Because if he did away with a supernatural God who commands you to do anything Jewish, then guess what? There ain't no God to do that. But why do I keep kosher? Because that's what Jews do. That's what Jews do. Jews don't eat pig. Jews don't have lobster. Okay, we don't go to there. We don't eat it. That's it. That's what makes Jews Jews. And what about wearing yarmulke? Why do I wear a yarmulke all the time? Because guess what? That's what Jews do. Why do I wear tzitzis? That's what Jews do. Why do I not drive in Shabbat? That's what Jews do. Because he interpreted everything sociologically as being what? Cultural aspects of Jewish life. These are the things that define us. Also in the eyes of the anti-Semite. Look at the Jew over there, right? Okay. So therefore, you understand now what Reconstructionism did. It's the smallest, it is considered one of the four movements in Judaism: Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstructionist. Now, Reconstructionism is very, very different today, for the most part. Although Reconstructionist synagogues and certainly Reconstructionist rabbis are the more liberal, even more so than Reform Judaism. Reconstructionist movement was the first to accept gay people to be rabbis, accept women as rabbis, accept intermarriages within the Jewish community concept, and all these different things. Because they said that we need to, even today, reconstructing Judaism so that it's a part of a modern life and acceptable to all modern people, whatever that means. Okay. So Mordecai Kaplan contributed in that way. And interestingly enough, to say to yourself, some of the things that you do as a Jew, do you do them because you believe God is commanding you to do them? Or simply, oh, this is something that Jews do, so I'm gonna light Shabbat candles, I'm gonna do this or that, and see yourself on that spectrum of behavior. So that rounds them up. Okay, by the way, you can take this home with you, and obviously look at these summaries of these major Jewish thinkers, and see, where do you fit in all of this? Who is God to you? And notice how Judaism really, and I think this is the challenge, okay, especially I think it's much more difficult to be a Reformed Jew than it is to be an Orthodox Jew. It's not easy being Orthodox, to be sure, because you have so many restrictions. But if you're brought up that way from the moment you're born, it's simply what you do all the time, okay? That's your way of life. That's it, okay? Reform Judaism is much more challenging, and why? Because you can do all of the stuff or nothing. Or where do you, or what in between? And how do you do it? And some of you heard me say this before. I think there are only two kinds of Jews in the world. There are actually only two kinds of human beings in this world. There are serious Jews and there are non-serious Jews. Because I've met, I'm sure you have also, I've met some Orthodox Jews who are just do it because. And to me, it's meaningless. They just do it. Whereas I've met many Reformed Jews, many of you here including in this statement, who actually are more religiously oriented than Orthodox Jews, because you're serious about your Judaism and what it means to you and how you figure out how to live it. But the question then becomes and that's going to summarize this whole thing, these three presentations, is where does God fit into it? Because notice what Mordecai Kaplan did, and that's why I left him for last. He's really in many ways the most extreme of all, because he basically eliminated God from everything, okay? And therefore, how do you then continue to be, what sustains you? See, for me personally, my beliefs in God, my sense of God in my life is what sustains me through all of these things that I go through and do. If I didn't have them, then guess what? If you eliminate the top one, theonomy, the theological one, and you're only on the autonomy one, guess what? You end up doing, one day you do this, next day you do that. And for me, at least, certainly having a structure, but for me, obviously, especially because the way that I was brought up, and that is to have a modern structure to my God, Jewish people life, talking about Franz Rosenzweig, sustains me every single day. I have certain things I do when I wake up in the morning and during the course of the day, and it's a constant awareness, and it makes me happy. So, does anyone want to comment, add some of your thoughts? Hi, guys. Peace. Does anyone want to add some thoughts? Eric, do we need to use that microphone thing? You don't have
Yeah.
So, folks at home, I'm sorry, this is not an interactive Zoom. I feel
In the chat.
I look in the chat. I feel now. I feel you. It's very, very. By the way, it's very difficult. One of the challenges that I first started off with Zoom stuff, going back to 2019, right, when we went to COVID period. It's like the Pleistocene era, right? The COVID period. They're going to Paleolithic period, Pleistocene, COVID period. Archaeologists will uncover the COVID period, and they're going to find a lot of masks lying on the ground all over the place. And, oh my God, look at these masks and stuff. Anyway, I found it very difficult in the beginning because, as I hope you understand, I gotta see someone. I gotta feel that person. I have to be in the presence, and I could not talk to a computer. And I got really tired of fixing my hair because I'd see, oh my God, look at the way I look. I don't know how many of you do that. I'm sitting in front of look at this. Look at my shirt. Judy's going to yell at me. Look at the way I look. This is terrible. I'd love to eliminate my face off of this thing, right? Right. It's really crazy. But anyway, I find that I've gotten over that. I think I'm doing a little bit better with that on Zoom. But that was a challenge because of the way I was brought up and my sense really of, obviously, of God. Yeah.
Okay. First, a bit of a shocking story, and then the reason why I did what I did. My father was an Orthodox Jew, He would never sit down at breakfast before he put the talis and the tefillin and said his davening. But then he sat down and made himself a delicious ham sandwich. Truth. I grew up thinking that that's the way it should be until I befriended a few Jewish kids and I realized that that's not the way it should be. So I came home to father, who was a delightful man, very easy to talk to, and I said, Dad, something is not kosher here, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I said, how do you put the two of two together? I mean, I don't get it. And his answer was, my kin, what is for God is for God, and what is for my stomach is for my stomach. And he lived very happily until he was almost 95. Later on, I did not feel comfortable in the Orthodox atmosphere, and Reform didn't at that time really appeal to me. But I found Reconstructionist. Okay. And I called my father and I said, Dad, I'm joining a Reconstructionist movement, and get ready because I will be called to the Torah for an aliyah. I will be wearing a tallit. And my father gave me the first tallit I ever had. He used to come to visit me, and in spite of the fact that normally he would not get in a car on Shabbos, he did have to get in the car when we went to my temple because there was no other way to get there. And there are still today people remembering the scene where father and I were called up to the Aliyah, and I was saying my bruha in my Hebrew way, and my father with the big talis on him was saying, Burihat Adonai, ba, 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 right?
Yeah.
I felt comfortable in the Reconstructionist movement because one concept, and that is the concept that religion should be an evolving issue. Because if you don't move with the times, you go under. And one nice thing about it was that every time during Shabbos or whatever we were doing, whenever there was an aliyah for the entire congregation, we all shared our talisim. And that was the thing that appealed to me. Okay. I'm here now, and it's an adjustment for me, and thanks to you, it's not a difficult adjustment. I feel, in a way, to me, you remind a little bit of Reconstructionism, and I don't mean it as an offense, but that's what I appreciate and I feel good. The best time for me when I am here is on Saturday when you are not on top of the bima, but down on the floor and you are equal with us. And that is what I like. Thank you.
Beautiful story. And by the way, your father, in a sense, was definitely within Reconstructionism. Yeah, because notice it was the top, they had a theonomy when the davening part, but in terms of what he was eating, yeah, exactly. And the evolving, and again, I think one of the things I try to stress is we all have to find God in our own way. And God also finds us in our own way as well, in that place. And it's going to change throughout our lives. Yeah. But it's what is consistent? You know, our lives change to say the least, obviously, for many ways and many reasons. But what's the consistent? I think Lynn had a hand back there, so we'll go to Lynn. Well, we don't want the people over there on that.
Two comments. First, Reconstructionism has changed its name to Reconstructing. It's an ongoing.
Did it really?
It did about 2 years ago, because it keeps rebirthing, or what is want to suggest. Put that aside for a minute. I have a big question. Radical amazement
That was
is
special.
with Heschel.
Yeah.
I've read and read and read, and I'm not yet connecting with what Heschel talks about with radical amazement.
Okay, what what Lynn is alluding to in his work, God in Search of Man, is what's called radical amazement. I'm going to put this, Gene Borowitz quite often used this word wow, these wow moments. He was a very dramatic speaker, very dramatic in many different ways, including one way, and people thought that he thought he was God, the students rather in the school. And on one, we had daily morning services. And in one year, one service, he actually worked it out that he actually put it before he got to the chapel. We had a chapel. We went to the old Hebrew Union College on West 68th Street, next to Stephen Weiss Free Synagogue. He actually placed himself inside the ark so that when we opened the door, he was in there. And everyone, of course, thought that was very funny. Some people were offended, whatever. That was him. But anyway, I think if I understand radical amazement, it's these wow moments where we can find God as well. It's these overwhelming moments. It's similar. I mean, I don't want to keep on going with the same images again, but that overwhelming sunset, or as I described it, Judy, my experience on Haleakala, on the extant volcano in Maui, and it's that moment. What it is the moment when we are so amazed in a radical meaning, in such an incredible, earth-shaking moment, the unexpected. So that when you find, that's one of the ways that you experience God. When we stood in Haleakala and saw that sunrise, and we went, wow, breathless. Right, exactly. I think that that's what he meant. But also, if you view every moment in radical amazement, then your life becomes much more much fuller, because you open yourself up into you. If you think about the intersecting triangles of the Jewish star, is that if you think of the one with the tip of the triangle on the top coming down like that, is that you have one moment, the single God expanding into life coming down. But then therefore there is the single you. And the minute you feel that expanse of the radical amazement of the God who is everywhere, the transcendent, and now you're this other point of that triangle below. And the minute you say, you then open yourself up and you have the top of the other triangle going like that, and you become one with the infinite. And that's very, today I do a class every single Thursday online, translating, going through a translation of a book that I'm doing, that's from the 17th century. And today we're talking a lot about what's called the Yehudim. Yehudim are unifications with the divine. And there are many different Kabbalistic methodologies by which we can become one with God. And the key is that's the radical amazement, because it's the infinite, similar to what we were saying a few minutes ago. It's the infinite coming into interaction and unifying with the finite. And then the minute we, as a finite little creature, we're a speck, not even a speck in existence, all of a sudden, wow, it's the meeting of the two. And I think that's what he said. That's a long answer.
Thank you, but you also just revealed something about yourself and your respect for what you learned from Rabbi Borowitz. When we all first met you, the first 6 months, wow, was what we heard you say about so many things.
Sure.
And you referenced it back to Rabbi Borowitz.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
We just learned something about you.
well, thank you. I'm sure. Yep. Rest in peace. Any other comments? Anyone want to share about God in your life? What have you come away with this? Do you feel that this has been more than simply intellectual interest? Anyone find it personally interesting, helpful to you?
I find that I can listen to you for an hour and a half, 2 hours, sometimes 3. And yet, I really don't gather it all in until I'm home.
Hmm.
And I'm looking up at the sky or whatever. And then you come back into being. You bring about a lot of thought.
Yeah. Well, these are concepts that many of you have never thought of before. And so I just feel like someone's here. Is interesting. These are the concepts, ideas which many of you never thought about before.
Popular mode.
Judaism, definitely, right? Yeah. Jane, you want to say something? Or maybe that, come over, get the mic, okay? Jane,
I just have one silly question. When you started at the beginning, is a bison kosher?
yes, yes. Okay, well, maybe, I don't
So
want,
it has, the cleft,
Yes.
Hoof and the
Cloven
chews
hoof,
attached
yes,
like a
yes.
cow?
yes. I guess what I'll do is, unless, I don't want to prolong the time, I know it's getting, getting close to, oh, sure.
Okay, so I'm trying to computer, I'm leaving Mike. So what I thought was interesting is we read each of these. I said, oh, that sounds like me. I read the next one. Oh, that sounds like Rabbi. And the next one. Oh, that's, so where are we now?
Oh, well, that's all, well, guess what? That's because you are a modern person. And every one of these, if we simply went to the Talmud, okay, only studied Talmud, we have obviously Zohar and all that. If we simply would have studied the Talmud, let's say, you wouldn't be able to say that because you would have a difficulty in relating to some of the things they're talking about because those were pre-modern experiences that they had 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, right? Like last year, we looked into Maimonides. Maimonides is a major force in our Judaism to this very day, but yet he lived 1,000 years ago in a very, very, very different world that we live in. But that's the beauty of, I think, of today. I hope that today's presentation, exactly, you hit it as usual, Eric, and that is, this is you because you're a modern Jew, and all of them. I also am a part of all of them. I guess it was who said reconstruct that I'm a little reconstruct. I am reconstructionist. I mean, there are certain things that I do Jewishly, not because God. I don't even think about God commanding me to do things because I wasn't brought up Orthodox to say the least. I was brought up very, very Reform. And so to me, a lot of the things I just do because as I've learned about them over the years is something that I do as a Jew. And that makes me feel fine. And I have no problem with that. Not at all. Especially, and going back to the whole idea of kosher, especially the kosher thing, because my level of kosher to me, Judy and I have a kosher home. We have separate dishes and the whole shtick. But on the other hand, when I go out, it's very different. And if I believe that a God is commanding me to do that, I'd be in a lot of trouble. Okay, I'd be in a lot of trouble because God doesn't distinguish between your home and your restaurant. Okay, that's why if you're Orthodox, you're Orthodox. Yeah, exactly. So yes, please, and then Lila. Okay, yeah.
So, I was gonna do something personal. Let me do the more theoretical one or the philosophical. The first two people you speak about talk in some ways about, Judaism or God and morality.
Right.
And how tightly intertwined they are. However, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. All right. So the however is that in modern times, we've seen relativistic morality. And it doesn't take, we can go back into the 1930s, I think in Germany, and find a moralistic a philosophy and morality that allowed the murder of 6 million of our people. Kind of like the question of how do we believe in God when so many bad things happen to people? This specifically, by the way, us people.
Well, oh, I got microphone right around my neck. I don't mean to put you off. I don't want to get involved in discussion about the Holocaust and evil in the world. There's a whole presentation, which would be much too long. But regarding the other statement, is, what was it again? Yeah. Well, in Judaism, well, let's put it this way. Certainly in Orthodox Judaism, there's no relativistic. It is what it is. Okay, it's either right or it's wrong. Now you might disagree. Take for instance the state of Israel, right? Even there, do we go into Gaza and blow the whole place up and kill everybody we hate or we disagree with, or do we not? And the question is that a question of morality or is it a question of war? And it gets very complex. Today, the problem, one of our challenges is these kind of questions have become more and more complex than ever because we're aware of all the different aspects that things can go, and it's so complex. But traditional Judaism, there is no question. Certain things, God says it, and that's it. Although, as you know, of course, the rabbis didn't accept that either so much. So, for instance, it does say in the Torah, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. And then the rabbi said, well, that makes no sense because what happens if a toothless guy knocks your tooth out, you know? And so they would discuss these things, and it never is black and white. Although Immanuel Kant, if I remember correctly, his book on pure reason, said very specifically, he was very much into telling the truth. And he said, no lie under any circumstance is acceptable. And certainly Hermann Cohen was very much in line of Immanuel Kant. And he would say, therefore, let's say in Nazi Germany, if a family was hiding out some Jewish people, and the Gestapo came and knocked on the door and said, do you have Jews in your house? Immanuel Kant said, you have no choice but to say, yes, I am. You have no choice. No Jew would ever say that, I don't think. Yeah. Lila will make you the last question or comment.
Okay. I just wanted to thank you for this afternoon, because I myself, I was brought up in an Orthodox neighborhood. My parents at the beginning were Orthodox, then conservative, with son of young Israel in between and all of that. And my husband and was the same way. He had gone to yeshiva until the mitzvah time, and then he came from, his parents came from Europe. His mother decided when they came here, you're an American, so therefore no Yiddish, no anything. She just ran a Jewish style, no candles or anything, but my family did the whole spiel. Anyway, but neither one of us knew anything about reform or anything else. He had, his father's family came from Germany, and some of them were ethical Jews.
Mhm.
We were invited to a wedding, and nobody knew what this thing ethical Judaism was. But we went, and we looked. It was so completely different. But the funniest thing is, everybody was ethical Jews. They married Jewish people, even though they didn't know
Wow.
anything
Yeah, but
about it. So it was so far. Then when we came to another cousin's house, again from that side of the family, it was reform. We came into the temple. We looked at it and said, we must be in the wrong place. It's it looked like that shul or temple already that we were used to. We see the rest of the family coming in. Oh, must be must be a Jewish.
well, Delilah, you're really describing the whole sense of modern Judaism, of this trip of which is not defined one way or the other, like Eric said.
Comfortable here, but at the beginning I didn't.
Yeah,
But I came because
yeah. Well, people end up becoming involved for different reasons. But oh, good. Well, we like you. That's for sure. You're the best. But I think we can say that life needs to be a journey with our loved ones. But for me also, and I think I could certainly say this for Judaism, it's a journey with God and God's journey with us. Because again, the Bible, and I believe, I forget which one of these thinkers said this or alluded to it, is that the Bible doesn't begin with a proof of God's existence. It simply says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It doesn't have to prove it because they knew it, okay? And that's the very beginning of our Bible. It's a God's journey with us, ours with God. We have to figure out what that journey means and to hold it precious. And each one of us will define it in different ways. But guess what? It also will change with us during the years of our lives. And I just want to end on a more comical note, going back to the question of kashrut. There was this is a joke, not true. There was a biologist in Israel who was able to mutate a pig that would actually have two stomachs, because it makes a kosher animal kosher. Chooses cud is what it does is, I don't want to get too graphic here, but actually chews something, throws it back up, and comes it back in, it has two stomachs. So it was able to actually mutate a pig that had two stomachs and also obviously had cloven hoofs. So it said, aha, I've created a kosher pig. So he went to the chief rabbi in Israel and said, Rabbi Shmuel, what do you think? I've created a pig that has two stomachs and has cloven hoofs. So can you now declare this pig to be kosher? And the rabbi said, let me think. No, once a pig, always a pig. Anyway, be well, everyone. Oh, yes, what's the comment?
It's from Elisa Eisenman. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa.
Thank you, Rabbi. You gave me more to ponder as if I don't generate my own puzzlements.
Okay, well, keep on being puzzled. That's life. Okay, everyone, see you hopefully tomorrow night over the weekend, Shabbat. We have a big weekend coming up. A big weekend. Helene does not want to take all the stuff home with her, so make sure you buy on Sunday. Shalom.
One more
Lisa Eisenman, yeah.
She couldn't make it today, so she's.
Yeah, I got it.
The other thing you didn't know was, it's a modern Japanese constitution. Okay. And that's still, the story. The family is very bad. Because the schools here. And this all goes on. It could never be. But we were 60 white people in America. Okay, who spoke Japanese. Okay, the government found them, did it. You go to Japan, you write the Constitution on the author. We just didn't write the Constitution. And then they have a whole picture of, if you don't talk, you're on the gates of the area. They have loaded with people. Okay, all Japanese people and some white people, and the whole thing on the picture. But whole raising American, two respects.